Hey everybody, welcome to this month's Wiser Wednesday. We've got a fireside chat today with Sarah Furness. So welcome, Sarah. Awesome to have you here. We're
Great to
um,
be here. Thank you, James.
we're going to be talking about mastering mindsets and how to make this the best year yet. Quick intro from me. I'm James Potton. Believe in a world of entrepreneurial success without burnout. As I often say, sort of got the charred t-shirt. And yeah, look, I mean, Sarah, you and I know each other from way back. I think the last time we saw each other was 15 years ago, something like that. And and it was more socially. And I don't think either of us necessarily remember like those nights, but it was a lot of fun, and it was amazing to see you'd written your own book and your journey, as a RAF pilot and a helicopter pilot, and your book resonated with me. I bought it. Our friend Emily shared it, and I was like, I really like what you're saying in here. And it really, there's something about mindsets that just it is so important, and you realize it's almost everything. So I'd love to jump into that with you today. And I'll start with a quote, which Henry Ford's, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So I think that's a really, really powerful really powerful kind of saying, because you suddenly realize that it is kind of your choice. There's obviously things that can prevent us from doing certain things, but there's a choice, and then there's the action, and following on from that. So bit of background, you've written this book, Flying Higher. So you've hit your fair share of overhead power lines, so I'm sure we'll dig into that and hear a bit more about it. You broke your jaw playing rugby against Loughborough. I think this was university times. You had to drink through a straw for 3 months and ended up, you went to a board, like the varsity board, didn't you? And ended up challenging Dina Carroll to a drinking competition. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. had been invited to go to the varsity match with the captain of the Cambridge University, rugby team, which was a big thing. And then a day before, I broke my jaw, and they operated on me, and I was out to here. Oh my God. And I was devastated because all I cared about was what I looked like, and then they wired my jaws together. But actually, because it was a rugby ball, the guys all thought it was hilarious, and they were just making me drink champagne through a straw. And then Dina Carroll was one of the dates of one of the other guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had to Google Dina Carroll. I sort of remembered it, but I was like, do I know that? I was like, 90s singer.
Yeah, she was lovely, by the way, really lovely.
Awesome. So yeah, so look, we're starting digging stuff. Look, what would be brilliant is just to, let's start with, tell us a bit about your journey, and how you got to where you are today, which is you're now on your entrepreneurial journey. So fire away.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, all started a long time ago when I watched Top Gun and decided that I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And my parents didn't have the sense to talk me out of it, which is kind of one of the first things, is that no one put any barriers in my way to start with. So, joined the Air Force, went through flying training, tried my hand at fast jets. That didn't work out. So I flew helicopters, which turned out to be an absolutely fantastic career. And, I served 21 years in the Air Force. So I served my last day, July 2021. So, most of my life. And I suppose towards the end, I became, life gets ugly, right? It doesn't always run smooth, and, you kind of sink or swim, I suppose. And the penny was starting to drop for me, that how we respond when things get difficult is a function of everything we've done before, and all the beliefs that we have, and the learned behaviors, and the way we've learned to cope. And certainly when I joined the Air Force 21 years ago, I think there was this idea that you're just born with it. You're either tough or you're not. But I've come to realize that's a load of rubbish. And the mind is completely trainable. And we can train it proactively. In fact, we have to train it proactively, because we can't rely on ourselves to just be naturally cool under pressure, because we're not designed to be. So I became really interested in that, and realized that was the key to performing better in the air. So that was my new passion. And then I left the Air Force and set up a company called Wellbeat, which ostensibly was a mindfulness coaching company. And it kind of grew from there, because although I was training people to train your mind to feel as strong as you look, that's the title of the book, I realized I had quite a unique privilege and experience to draw on, because I could relate it back to my flying experience. So I could sort of show it working in action, and I had that credibility and those stories that I could tell people to kind of bring it to life, and also to reassure people that it's not just about sitting in a field of daisies and going like that. You know, there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing that you can draw on, you know, not many people can draw on being a helicopter pilot in the RAF. So that, I mean, those stories, it's really powerful. Yeah, and you've, known you for a number of years, but like that, you've always had that, that sort of, I think you mentioned it in the book, like there's a sort of, someone said that you're superhuman, but like there was always that, air about you. Like it was, even on a night out, it was like you were someone who you were very determined. So you've always had that, haven't you? You've always been like someone who just will be willing to just, push, like, how do you know where the edge is if you don't push? I think you've always had that kind of like inner thing within you, haven't you?
Yeah, and I think I probably got that from my mum, and it's, you call it determination, which is a lovely way to describe it. At times it can be stubbornness, it can be awkwardness. So, I think part of it is realizing that it's a strength and not a weakness, because it depends how you see it. And I think I was taught that from a really young age, or absorbed it without realizing it, that actually just because, when people say I can't do things, I just dig my heels in and go, nope, not accepting it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, look, we'll dig into that a bit more. So yeah, tell us about the book, and what is why did you write it? What's the there's always in theory a raison d'etre to write in a book. Yes, so what were you trying to achieve?
There's a sort of, the book is definitely the favorite thing I've done, because it aligns business purpose with personal purpose, and that's the holy grail, isn't it? If you're self-employed and you're running your business, you want to do something that you love and fills you full of purpose. So the business side was, how do I get the message out to more and more people? How do I become global, and also it's credibility. And when motivational speakers stand on stage, which is what I am now, a lot of them kind of frisbee books into the audience, because it's one of these things, you're like, you're a speaker, really well. Have you got a book? So there was a sort of definite business thing. It's like, when are you going to publish your first book? But it aligned perfectly with what I wanted to do, because I love writing. But mostly I've come to have a deep respect for human beings. I just think that we are so incredibly resilient and so incredibly loyal and compassionate and wonderful, that I really wanted to, and it sounds cheesy, but I wanted to kind of give this gift to the world. I think Brian Cox talks about his book, The Human Universe, and he talks about his love letter to humanity. And that's kind of what it is. I want, the amount of people I've coached who are so talented and so lovable and so brilliant, and they doubt themselves all the time. And I know how that feels. And I just want to show people that, they can dare to believe in themselves. And my book is how you take yourself on that journey to believe that you're actually really fantastic and you can achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Awesome. I'd like, there's quite a, I suppose it's it'd be interesting to dig into the hitting of the overhead cables. So
yes,
talk us through, like, because it wasn't just once, right? It was a couple of, well, you weren't flying the second time.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, exactly. No, I think I'm the only person in the Air Force that's hit wires twice. People often ask me, like, did you not get in loads of trouble? But actually, the Air Force is very good at having a kind of learning culture.
Yeah.
But yes, so hitting the wires, that was an incredible moment for lots of reasons. And you made a comment earlier about, you do something and it's the product of something that you've kind of put the work in. And I think that was one of the key lessons I took away from it. So there's two lessons. I was flying through this valley in Morocco. I was quite young, I was about 23 years old, flying in my Puma helicopter. We're low flying, that's what helicopters do. So we're very close to the ground. We're about 50 feet off the ground, which is the height of a 2-story building. We're going 140 miles an hour with our hair on fire. Great fun, to be honest. And we're following, the Moroccan map, which perhaps was not up to the same sort of rigorous standards as the British maps. Suffice to say, we came around this corner and we smashed through these cables that were strung across this valley. And we hit, there were 3 wires, and we hit the aircraft in 3 places. And the canopy just shattered. The cockpit got very noisy. I basically turned my helicopter into a convertible, there was no windshield. And I just remember thinking, oh, this is how I'm going to die. And, actually, I remember thinking, oh, well, that's, there are worse ways to go, and feeling quite relieved. But the thing that happened next, this is the really kind of key moment. My instructor, who was sat in the left-hand seat, shouted, "Fly the aircraft, Sarah." And I didn't know it then, but this was a key moment because he brought my attention back into the cockpit. And that's important because with everything that is going on in the outside world, and with all the distractions that we have, and because of tech, we can be everywhere at once, but we've forgotten a fundamental human truth, which is our attention can only be in one place at a time. The brain's not going to change anytime soon. We can only focus on one thing at a time. And I needed to be focusing on flying the aircraft, not thinking about my eulogy. So when I then, many years later, got really interested in mindfulness and how to train the brain, I kind of realized, oh my God, that moment was kind of mindfulness in action, because my brain went off into a place it didn't need to go. And I was, and all over the place, and it needed to be on flying the aircraft. And that's what mindfulness is. So I was sort of reconstructing, I suppose, or going back through history and seeing all the things, all the groundwork that had been laid by the fantastic training that I'd had in the military, and realized, actually, I can use this to deliver mindfulness to the world, essentially. But, that I'm probably getting very excited and talking too much. The key takeaway from this is we perform at our best when we focus on one thing and we choose what that one thing is in that moment. So ditch multitasking, start unitasking, and you will do it better and you will feel calmer.
Yeah, no, it's like, it really, again, that really resonated with me as well. I think I was fortunate, like when I was growing up, I well, I used to show chickens, but that's a different story. But like then I got into windsurfing. Then fortunate enough to get into the British windsurfing team. But we had a coach like age 14, 15, and our coach, and actually, unfortunately, so Chris Daisy was our coach. And he's unfortunately passed away recently, but he when I reached out to him to say thank you, that you sort of like have that moment, you're like, I need to go and thank some people who've helped me in life. And it was about a year ago that I reached out to him, and he wrote back saying, hey, we were using the same model for the windsurfers as Ben Ainsley was getting with the sailors, and that was all about where your head was. So it was about, on the board, were you thinking about like what was happening on the board, where the people you were trying to beat on the race course were, or what the clouds were doing, what's happening with the weather system. So but just the ability to think about where you were thinking was like, it was key. So and we all fall into the trap of multitasking once you start running a business or being an entrepreneur or whatever. It's so tempting to think that you're achieving so much with the forever to-do list. So
yes.
And then the second time, I think you were not flying the second time, but you were in the back. But then your response was...
no, I was still on the front. But yes, my response. So the second time, it's about 2 years later. I was flying through the Wye Valley in Wales, and I was the navigating pilot. So I had the map out, and I was looking for all the wires. And because it was a really windy valley. I don't know if you've been to the Wye Valley, but it's a fantastic valley to fly down, and it's very.
I've flown down it. I've paddleboarded down it, which is a bit different.
Don't fly down it when I'm flying down it. Disastrous. But and actually, also, I'd flown down that from north to south in a Hawk previous years, and I know that that's the flow. So I wanted to make sure I was really low so we wouldn't crash into anything coming the other way. And then we came around the corner and hit wires again. But this time I didn't. Everything was just kind of instinctive, and I immediately did my emergency handling drills, and I did the Mayday call and all the rest of it. And we landed straight ahead, and it was all kind of very calm, actually. And I remember when we landed, the captain turned to me and just went, he was just amazed. And he was like, how did you do that? Like, I was still processing what had happened, and you'd done everything. And I was like, well, I've done this before, haven't I? But I think the key kind of mindfulness takeaway is my brain knew what to do because I'd done it, and I'd created those kind of neural pathways of, trigger, action. And the thing about mindfulness is that you can create helpful neural pathways between a trigger event, how you interpret it, and then what action you take. That's all up for grabs. And until you have that light bulb moment, you think, oh, well, I'll always be X, I'll always be this way under pressure, or I'll always, be a bit anxious. Actually, no, all of this is stuff that we can do something about. And that's the proof. So it was very helpful that I crashed into ours a second time so that I could do the proof of concept bit.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't plan to do what you did, but amazing that you definitely got the learning. Like, there's the old adage, it's only a failure if you don't learn, right? So
yes, yeah.
So that's great. I mean, I suppose if you try and relate it back to business, and I guess like there's always this kind of parallels with sport as well, where if it's a netball match, football match, whatever it is, like people are on the pitch playing as a team for a certain amount of time and then training the rest of the time. It's almost as if business is not thought about that. It's everyone's on the pitch all the time. And well, I mean, I don't know. It just makes it very hard for people to perform.
Agree. And I think that's the thing that having left the Air Force, I see things I never saw before because, it's easy to think of people in the military, we're on the front line all the time and we're dodging bullets. We're not. We probably spend 30% of our time in a war zone, which means we spend 70% of our time training. Now, when you're running a business or you're working in a big organization, that's just not going to happen because you can't. I get it. It's unrealistic to go, you must train 70% of the time. But the reason we're good under pressure is because we put the training in. So how can you train, within your business? And I think it is learning from experience. And I think it's easy to go, we made a mistake, therefore, we've been a failure, or we haven't learned. The reality is humans learn by making mistakes. So if we can change our mindset and go, I am learning on the job, and have a sort of training mindset and seeing every opportunity, every time you have a client conversation, and if it goes badly, you go, okay, well, that's a learning opportunity. We can change our mindset and then we can start to really maximize the training that we're getting out of doing our job every day.
Yeah. I mean, and then that sort of comes down to, the culture, values, it being a safe place to make mistakes. These are fundamentals because not all organizations have that. So, a lot of the time there's a almost a fear culture, which makes it really hard for people to experiment and push boundaries because they don't want to, they don't want to stick their head above the parapet. So it's quite, I've always been a massive fan of the 20% time. Don't know where it originally came from. I know Google, have it where people are allowed up to 20% of their time to develop themselves or something in the business and try and push things forwards. I mean, again, it's not always realistic. I mean, you're looking at like pretty much a day a week or whatever, but which is a lot when you think about actually what that means. But even still, if you start to like edge towards that as a concept, I think it can that creating a learning organization means that it's able to innovate and able to like evolve with what's happening in the world, I believe. But
and also an environment where people will speak up increases cognitive diversity because in the military we're quite a hierarchical organization, so there's a danger you've got one person giving the orders and then 100 people following. So really one person's doing the thinking. But really what you want is 100 people thinking for themselves. So how do we encourage people to think for themselves and speak up and say what they're talking about? And I think that's a two-way thing, by the way. There's a lot of talk about psychological safety and we've got to make people feel safe to speak up. And that's obviously a leadership function that we can do. And, one of the easiest ways to do that is to go first and share when you make mistakes and things like that. But I think the other thing is realizing that no matter how good you are at leadership and no matter how many times you put your little culture thing on the wall, people, you can't make people feel something they don't want to feel. So as much as you want people to feel safe to speak up, it's their choice. And I think we can recognize that it will always feel inherently risky to disagree with someone because we're people pleasers, and we don't like going against the grain. So what that means, pardon me, is that if someone speaks up, they've made a choice to be brave. And I think we can start to celebrate a culture of bravery as opposed to waiting for it to feel safe, because we could be waiting a long time for that. And that's probably a privilege of having been in an organization where I did speak up, and that's because there was a lot of work that went into that. But I think it works both ways. It comes from individual responsibility of being brave and going first, but also the leadership and the culture, setting the environment where people are rewarded for speaking up.
Yeah. Look, I mean, in each business is a different culture, and you can only look at, well, these are things, this is best practice or stuff I've seen work. Is what would work within your organization is often the kind of discussion that goes on. I've found that I screwed up cards to be really good, and obviously was the first one to, having implemented it as sort of MD, I was the first one to fill it in. But it did start to give people permission to not always get everything right, and to also talk about it. I guess another thing that I think is useful is an anonymous suggestions box, and actually trying to do town halls. So you're basically once a month giving the team the opportunity to ask questions that they might not want to ask in the room, but if you read out what someone's written down. And it's funny, isn't it? It's like, often it's like, why are we buying cheap ketchup is like the first thing that comes up. So right, from now on, we're only going to get Heinz. But it is but it matters, right? So for some people that really matters, and like you start to get into the nitty gritty of the real stuff once you get through the peripheral stuff. But just the team seeing that it's safe to ask questions, I think is really, really powerful. So okay, interesting. Do you think like the RAF and the military are changing in the way in which they're trying to get like 100 people to think?
Yeah, I think this sort of psychological safety is a real priority. It always has been, because if we get things wrong, people die, so we have to, and the thing is, we're also in an inherently risky business because we go to war and we put people in risk. So we cannot expect everyone to come home. That's the harsh reality. So I think as an organization, it's always has been very committed to creating psychological safety, and it's probably classed as one of the world leaders. I used to teach it, and we used to have people from air forces all over the world coming in and getting our training, because we were seen as kind of first class in this area. But I also do think, and like I say, probably as a privilege of having been in an organization that had a really good culture, I have still been in scenarios where no matter how many times I tell my crew, it's okay for you to disagree with me, they won't, because people would rather die than let you down. So I just think that we need to, rather than necessarily we want to look for psychological safety, but we also want to inspire people to be brave. We've got to meet in the middle, because we can't create a space where there is an absence of fear. We're always going to feel fear. It's always going to feel inherently risky to do certain things. And the thing about mindfulness is you can learn to tolerate your fear, and you can do what feels right in the presence of fear. So I think we need to give people this confidence that actually, even though it feels scary, you've got this, you can do this, and you can go first, and you can stick your head above the parapet. And that's how we kind of drive innovation. But if we wait for everyone to feel safe, I think we'll be wasting a long time.
Yeah. And indeed, you can't be brave if you're not afraid, right? So there needs to be a level of fear.
Right, it's a paradox.
Yeah, no, exactly. Is it worth, because you've got your model, the habits,
yes.
it'd be nice, talk us through that, just so we understand a bit about.
Yeah, sure. So I came up with that. So habits, we love mnemonics at the Air Force. So it stands for healthy automatic behaviors in threatening scenarios. Bit of a tongue twister, but really all that means is you respond skillfully under pressure. And it looks at the components that you need to be able to respond under pressure. And so, the first thing is, the first H then stands for kind of healthy stress versus unhealthy stress. Actually, there's no such thing as healthy stress. Stress is stress. But I'm getting pernickety about language here. The point is that a little bit of pressure, when we're in stretch is actually really, really good for us. But when we kind of go over the edge of the curve and we're in panic, then our decision-making goes down. Our emotion regulation is impaired. So we snap at people. And one of the problems is that, society, or I don't know, maybe you're brought up with these beliefs, is we expect to be naturally good when we're, in fight or flight. And the only thing we're designed to do in that moment is run away or fight, so we're not designed to think rationally under pressure. And we give ourselves such a hard time for not being good in this area. So actually, one of the most important things we can learn is recognizing when we're in that acute stress and working out how to get back, into stretch, because that's where the magic happens. So that's the first H. And, a really simple thing we can do is just slow down our breathing, because it just tricks our system into thinking that we're in rest and digest. It's incredibly effective. So it's that, operating in stretch, not in panic. And then, the habits bit, the A-B bit is about focusing your attention where you want it to be on one thing at a time if you want to achieve your maximum performance. So that's A and B, because it's attention and be in one place. And then the I is interferences. So great in theory to focus on one thing, but life still continues. We've still got things flashing at us. We've still got people that need us. So how do we signpost? How do we signal? And how do we set expectations so that we can give ourselves an hour a day to focus on our high value task? And then there's the T is train hard, fight easy, which we sort of covered already. But really, again, it's, we can't expect to be good under pressure unless it's an instinctive reaction, because we will do what's instinctive. So if you want to be good under pressure, it has to be automatic. We make something automatic by repeating it over and over and over and over again. You know this from your windsurfing, right? So we make it automatic. And the way we repeat it to make it automatic. And the easy way to repeat something is to make it a habit, because then you just do it every day without thinking about it. So that's the whole train hard, fight easy. And there's this idea that I know you touched on before, that nothing happens by magic, nothing is given to us, but it's all up for grabs. But it's all down to the work that we put in before the fact, and trying to make it as routine as possible.
Okay.
So that's a quick run through the habit.
No, I love it. It's I'm a big fan of creating like mnemonics as well. So I guess for the listeners, it's really tricky, because it's sort of easy-ish to say and then really hard to apply. So let's just take that stretch kind of stress scenario. Are there and it's going to be different for each person. You almost have to start to be good at noticing when you're kind of just tipping over the edge. For people who don't know the diagram, it's eustress and de-stress, isn't it? And it's kind of and then you basically, if you just get over the top of it, your cortisol increases and your effectiveness basically drops through the floor.
That's right. Yes.
So it's you want to just be sliding up and down the top of the slope at the top, but never popping over the edge. So what are some examples for people to think about when they might have popped over into
and that's it. I think most people, this is obviously an exercise I would often do in a workshop or when I'm coaching with someone, but it is, tell me about a time when you've behaved in a way you regretted, because that was almost certainly you under threat or under pressure. And what that tells me is that you haven't yet learnt a skillful way of dealing with that threat. That's all that tells me. But the first thing is working out what how you've got there, but then working backwards and go, right, what was the trigger? What thoughts went through your head? How did you start to feel? What was your physiology? Did you feel hot? Did you feel tense? Did your jaw clench? So it's just starting to sort of develop a mental map of what you look like when you are under threat. So then the next time it happens, you can sort of nip it in the bud. Or if you go over the line, which we do from time to time, we're human, we've got a way of recognizing, I kind of had a bit of an outburst there. I'm going to, go for a walk. have some fresh air, have some, do some breathing, etc., etc. So you're absolutely right. This is an exercise in self-awareness without beating the crap out of ourselves, because we are human beings and we are not designed to be, James Bond under stress.
Yeah. And so for you, so then this kind of this mindfulness piece comes in, and we've also got the sort of empathetic witness that we can go into. I actually, it'd be interesting to hear your mindfulness story. I remember I was in a group, like in a workshop, and someone at the basic person running the workshop went round the group, and we all knew each other. We'd already done like, a retreat or something, so we knew like the background of everyone. And she went around the room and got absolutely nailed like everyone's what was going on in their life. Like, you've got, challenges at the moment with your with your dad, you need to go and resolve those. You've got like things going on in work that she was just like spot on. We knew backgrounds to everything. She got to me and I was like, oh my God, what's she going to bloody say to me? Like, how does she know this about all these people? And she got to me and she just said, oh, look, you stick your neck out. You're always gunning for the next thing. You're always driving. You need to meditate. And that was it. So I was like, all right, okay, I probably should meditate then. And it was a real moment, like that, when I hadn't realized like how much stress I was under. We were growing a business from 3 to 50 people over 12 years. I sort of stepped into the MD role. We went from 2.8 to 8.9 mil turnover in 1 year. And, and I was just like, had all this stress on me, definitely starting to get like stomach ulcer or whatever. So, and like mindfulness was this like, my body, like, it's that kind of reward system was just like, thank you. Like, I just so much, whatever it is, serotonin, whatever it was that rushed through my body as a result of doing mindfulness, that, I don't do it all the time, but it kept that practice up a lot, just to, and I know I can do it really quickly, and I can do, just that's the brilliance of once you've understood it. So how about yourself? What was your journey?
No, and it's a really exciting point that you can get to, where it just becomes a framework, it becomes a mindset, as opposed to something you have to do, and I still practice it every day, but it just becomes a lifestyle choice. It's a way you see things. But I think there was a couple of light bulb moments. One was I was actually in therapy, or doing counseling, and I said, oh, but I'm fiery, or I'm moody, or whatever I said, which is all true, by the way. And she said, that's the narrative you've got in your head about yourself. I think I said something like, oh, I can't, how can I help that? I'm just a moody person. And she said, that's the narrative you've got in your head. And I was like, what do you mean, what narrative? What are you talking about? And then I realized, oh my God, these are the stories we tell ourselves. And don't get me wrong, I probably always will have a go-to, where I tend to be more fiery than I am submissive type thing. But the first sort of life-changing moment for me was that you can choose how you respond to your feelings and thoughts. They pop up very quickly, so you can't necessarily stop thinking. And mindfulness isn't about drowning out the thoughts or having an empty head and walking around in a vacuum. It's about seeing them and going, but I can choose what to do. I can choose to engage with it, or I can choose to go, that's, feisty Sarah that's come to say hello, and I can say thank you very much, and on you go. That was amazing to me, that I had a choice about how I engaged with my emotions. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was, emotions are transient, but they also want an audience, because let's think about it, anxiety, fear, sadness, they're all trying to tell us something. They're all there to protect us. We see them as bad, but they're actually our most loyal friends. So I think once we learn just to give them an audience for 30 seconds, sometimes we just need to grieve, or just need to let ourselves feel pissed off about something, and let ourselves do that, and then go, right, but it's no longer serving me to engage with this, so now I'm moving on. So it's that kind of balance of acknowledging and accepting that emotion without shame, and then going, and now it's time to move on, and I'm going to focus on something else. And that changed my life.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's almost and again, you talk about empathetic witness. It's the point at which you can almost see yourself. I call it the art of looking sideways. I don't know why, yours is a way better way of describing it, but I sort of say to people, like, you almost need to be able to remove yourself and look at what what's really happening. And it's almost, you know, look, in a systems mindset concept, like we are always part of the system, like and the system is just where we decide, you know, if we want to look at a system, we have to decide where we draw the boundaries on the system. And so yeah, we've always got some kind of influence, and there's leverage points in a system and so on and so forth. So you kind of, there's so much you can do once you kind of, I suppose that's talking about power, isn't it? It's realizing, like, if you're able to see yourself as an empathetic witness, you're suddenly able to start understanding like what your situation might really be, rather than like what it feels like to be in it. And yeah, look, and also, you know, empathy for others is hugely powerful.
Definitely.
I've seen, if you basically, if you want to work out whether what you're suggesting or like doing with someone is right, try it on yourself first and see how it feels. And there's a real realization. It's like, well, I wouldn't like it if someone did that to me or whatever, or, you know, approached me in that way. So there's these things that we're not really taught to you're not taught it at school, miles from it. So yeah, talk us through, you know, your sort of viewpoint on being an empathetic witness.
Yeah, again, so I think, and this is something that came to me much later in life, but I think the key outcome that you get is kind of self-sufficiency and confidence, because I worry there's a bit of a narrative out there that says, you know, particularly with COVID and, you know, the limelight on mental health, we think that if people are stressed, that there's something wrong and that we're broken, or if we think if people are sad, then there's something wrong. So we're getting this message over and over again that we're a bit broken. And then we go, yeah, I am a bit broken, actually. But actually, you know, again, emotions are there to sort of try and protect us. Doesn't mean they always help us, but they are trying to help us. But I think a lot of my clients will go, well, I wouldn't be thinking if it wasn't true. So what does that say about me? What does it mean? And we're looking for this meaning all the time. I'm like, you know, the reason that I doubt myself is because I'm a terrible person. And you know, I've got imposter syndrome. But what if it is just what it is? And you can just acknowledge it and go, yeah, I have self-doubt because I'm a human being. Actually, probably quite good that I'm not completely up my own arse all the time. So I think it just gives you an ability to see emotions for what they are. You know, they are data, not directives. And once you kind of give them an audience, they are kind of they leave you alone. So and I think the outcome from that is you feel confident in your ability to, you know, navigate whatever life throws at you. And you get self-belief. And, you know, if there was one ingredient that I could give everyone, particularly when we're, you know, entrepreneurs and running businesses, but let's face it, we all need it. It's just to believe in ourselves a bit more. And I think when you can just sit with a difficult thought or a feeling and go, it's not going to kill me. It doesn't mean anything. It's just there to try and help me. And I'm just going to witness it and let it go. Then you go, actually kind of stronger than I thought. You know, I can tolerate this. I'm actually, you know, I'm pretty strong. And, you know, I just want people to feel a bit more of that. And then when you've got that kind of ingredient, you feel like you can kind of take on everything.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, there's another bit around mindfulness, and we kind of know that we've got the sort of subconscious and conscious, and obviously everything's filtered in the conscious, and the subconscious is it's almost like accessing a different you know, a different way of thinking. I guess it is more feeling than thinking, as it were. But yeah, I find it interesting. I mean, I don't know for sure, but it feels a bit more like when you're meditating and using mindfulness that you're accessing the subconscious a bit more than the conscious mind. I don't know whether you agree with that or.
Yeah, and I think that's it. You know, none of us really fully understand it yet. So yeah, you know, that's why I think sometimes the language is quite vague, and it took a long time for the penny to drop about mindfulness. It's like, what is it? And I do a Headspace every day, and I think Andy from Headspace is brilliant at explaining it. And I learn something new every day. So, you know, I think it's very hard to sort of reduce mindfulness to that one thing that it is. But ultimately, you know, it's a sort of learning about yourself, befriending yourself, and realizing you've got everything right here to study the human mind, which means we've got everything right here to study other people's minds and feel a sense of, you know, humanity and connection. So, you know, when you were going to talk about the story of Janet, you know, and when she learned to sit in her own pain, when she finally managed to do that, she realized she wasn't alone, and actually started to feel more connected to the rest of the world, because we all experience suffering and we all want to be free of it. That's, I wish we could turn it off, but we can't.
Yeah. I love that you call it mindfulness as well. I think that's many forms of mindfulness.
Of course. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Mindfulness is a commitment that we make to training our brain, but there's no rule that says the training can't be fun. So, as long as you're focusing your attention where you choose it to be, that is practicing mindfulness. And you can do that by focusing on having a glass of wine. Why not? Maybe not at 12:41 in the afternoon, but
no, not yet. Well, it's PM. It's and somewhere in the world it's even later. So hey.
Well, exactly.
You sort of touched on it a little bit earlier. I was interested to see, I think it was the Alison Carter study that said like delving into the past can be counterproductive. Like, did you sort of, what's your
Definitely. It's such a great point. So Alison Carter did a study on mindfulness in the military, and I think two really big takeaways resonated with me. The first thing is, in theory, everyone can practice it, but this empathetic witness to stress tolerance thing we've talked about, I would generally introduce that later on down the line. I think the first thing we need to learn is how to let go. Because if we don't know how to let go of something, then the temptation is we hold on to something. And with mindfulness, we can sit in observation and we can observe ourselves. But if we get that wrong and we end up reliving something, then we can essentially re-traumatize ourselves. And every time we remember something, we put a slightly different blueprint on it, and we can actually make things worse. They say time is a great healer. Not always. Depends what you do with it. So if you relive something and make it a little bit worse every time, it can actually do more harm than good. So we need to be able to observe it. But I think the other key thing is we make it time bound. So let's just say we want to sit with a feeling of fear or sadness. We sit with it for 30 seconds or a minute, and then we let it go. So I personally wouldn't try doing distress tolerance until I'd learned to let go first, because you've got to be able to do that, or else it becomes self-harm. So that was a really key point. The other thing that came out of Alison Carter's study was that team mindfulness was something that people in the military really got on with. And that just means being mindful of your team, checking in with other people. So you can have an increased awareness of yourself, but you can also have an increased awareness of others. How are they showing up? What are they saying? What are they not saying? How are they holding themselves? And actually, again, that is very mindful and kind of reflecting outwards and being compassionate. And when you do that, you actually sort of fill the world up with warmth. That's something that comes quite naturally to people in the military, because we work in teams all the time.
No, it's no, it was really interesting to see it, because there is you can end up, it's a bit like, do you listen to the stories of the past, or like do you try to remember the future, as it were? Do you try to create a future that you want? And certainly in business, that's like how I work with people, is to try to get people to imagine something different, like how it could be different. Where are you? Understand that, but like how could it be different? And almost approach it from a as if you're there. So use techniques to get people to call it future facing, like actually write it in the present as if you're there, and as if it's happened. And like, I don't want to get into like the manifesting kind of like argument, but it there's something in creating a stronger like vision and voice of the future. And this whole concept is, if you don't have a big enough dream, then you become part of someone else's. So when working with entrepreneurs, it's like you really need this dream to be big, and others will be part of yours. So.
But I think I would be wary of talking about manifesting, but I tell you what, it's worked for me. And because our thoughts and feelings and our behaviors all link, if you say something, you start to feel it. Again, what Henry Ford was saying, if you think you can't do it, you probably can't. And if you say enough times, I'm crap at volleyball, guess what? You crap at volleyball, and this really worked for me in a positive way, because I was really cheeky in that I desperately wanted to get into Henley Literary Festival with my first book. And I sort of went on a campaign of influence / bullying. And I wrote a few articles for Henley Standard and Henley Life. And it's, at the bottom would always say, Sarah Furness is writing her first book, which will be published in time for Henley Literary Festival. And then, but I emailed them kind of every couple of months, go, is there space yet? And eventually they went, go on then. So I got, so it came true. And, I don't know if that's because they got bored of hearing from me, but I thought, I'm taking a risk here. I could look a bit stupid, but, who cares? So you just say this stuff. And I think because you're demonstrating that commitment, and your brain is very good at delivering whatever you tell it to. So if you say it, I think it does happen. It does work,
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. No, I do. I don't know how it works. And I do think we need to be careful with, the fad element of sort of, I think there's even like a Netflix thing on it right now. It's almost become a religion, right? So so we do need to be careful with it.
I agree, and also I think it's worth pointing out it can work the other way. So one of the things I talk about in my talks is the power of choice and how we unwittingly give choices away all the time. And one of my pet phrases is when someone says, so and so makes me happy, or so and so makes me sad. The reality is, although it might not feel like it, you choose how you feel. And when you practice mindfulness, you realize you have a lot more choice than previously you thought. But if you get angry because your partner left out the dishes, that's your choice to get angry. So it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to get angry or be annoyed, but we're giving our power away all the time and saying so and so has the power for me to feel a certain way. And when we say this over and over again, our brain starts to believe it. And there's a story I tell about when I picked my son up from nursery, and he was 2.5, so he could barely speak. And the nursery worker ran out to me when I went to pick him up. And she said, oh, Sarah, you've got to hear what happened today. Arthur, he was playing alongside this other kid, and the kid dropped their toy and the toy broke. And Arthur turned around to this kid and went, how does that make you feel? And like, everyone thinks this is adorable, but I'm like, oh my God, from the age of 2.5, apparently we're using language which is giving our choices away. This is terrifying. So it's becoming aware of the words we say do matter, and they can work in a positive and a less positive frame of mind. So if we can be mindful about the words we use, a lot of that, that can go a long way.
Super interesting. I think there's also an element of not making the sort of subconscious mind think that you're lacking, by saying you want something can also sound like you don't have, so you've got to be careful about like how you paint like the vision. And look, in business, putting it back to business, profit is an output from having like the having purpose, a plan, having like a learning environment for your team, like having systems so that you've got efficiency and repeatability, knowing like what your sales cycle and delivery cycle are. Like these are all like functions, and profit is the output. So but that is as a result of delivering value to the customer. So your focus needs to be on the delivering the value, and the profit is the thing that is as a result of doing all the other work. And I see it so often where people are focusing on profit. I mean, it is a sort of starting point. Businesses have to make money, but you want to sort of take it to a high level, thinking about Maslow. Again, it can be a little bit cliched, but you're trying to get up to sort of self-actualization in the organization, not worry about food, shelter, water, at the bottom.
Yes. Yeah.
You talk about victim mentality in the book. Is there anything that you think would be useful for the audience to hear regarding that?
Definitely. I think I have definitely been there. I've definitely been that person that has been a bit of a victim, and it's a very unflattering phrase, and it's the last thing that anybody wants to think of themselves as. And one of my jobs now is to go first and go, I definitely had a victim mindset. And really what it means is you're giving your power away and you're waiting for someone to fix a problem for you. It's not a design, well, it is a design flaw. It's not your fault. Seligman did experiments in the 70s to prove that this is something that can be you can be conditioned into learnt helplessness. That was the phrase he came up with. But what that means is it actually comes down to sort of lack of self-belief, because you don't believe that you have the power to change your situation. So you stay miserable and you blame other people, because it's more comfortable to blame others than it is to blame yourselves. The last thing we want to do is think that we're responsible for our own pain or for our own lack of progress in a business. So I think the first thing to understand is it's a completely normal thing to do. Actually taking responsibility for choices is scary, so there's no shame required if we recognize that actually we've been kind of blaming other people and pointing the finger a bit. But if you do that, and you recognize that, that's an opportunity to go, okay, life's not fair. I can maybe do a bit of distress tolerance and spend 30 seconds going about it. And then after 30 seconds, I'm going to go, what can I do in my circle of influence that will have a positive impact? And, a top tip here is the things we can influence are me. What other people do, we care about and we can have some influence on, but ultimately, because of this thing called free will, we don't get to decide what other people feel, think, and do. We can decide what we feel, think, and do. So start here. So spend a minute having a moment if you want, and then go, right, circle of influence time. What am I going to do? What's my next move? And that's how you move out of victim mindset into, a position of power.
Yeah, amazing. I've seen a model. I think it's referred to as the sort of levels of. The thing is, I like it in a business term, but I think it's kind of like spirituality levels, which is weird. So it goes. If you say it's that, then you immediately turn off like half the business world. So, but the model is, I think, fundamentally like, spot on, because once you get out of victim mentality, you then effectively are in a success state, but that success state is you being successful.
Yes.
And that's brilliant until they then bloody promote you into a management role and you're used to being successful, but you're not used to sort of sharing that success. I struggled with this loads when I started going up, through the ranks and so on in terms of management, and I actually ended up getting like hypnosis to like deal with it, because I had to switch, because especially like windsurfing, like British Youth Windsurfing Team, it's just you on the board, like just you either like you've got your team behind you for sure, like mum on the beach, like getting food, you've got your coach and so on, but on the day you on the board kind of you make or break that. So I had to sort of, it was really interesting. It was only about like 50 minutes. They took me into, it was just like sitting on the beach, hearing the waves sort of like lapping the shore in the background. So you're totally aware of stuff, but they get you to consider it was sort of like this sort of bit weird, but like a tree of success rather than individual success. Okay. And like embracing that. And it was weird, like literally left there with a completely different mindset, that success amazing. Now looks like the team doing well. So personally, that was a change in a belief, and it completely changed my behavior, and to be honest, it was at a perfect time, because I was about a year off stepping into an MD role rather than just a smaller team. And so it was about losing the need for control. So it was a control need that basically allows that shift. I think there's other levels in the model, but
I was going to say that also sounds like kind of reframing, which I found incredibly powerful, because also we have setbacks along the way, and I'm not saying that we have to be artificially cheerful all the time and go, yay, I failed, woo, no one likes failing, it's fine. But I know one of the things we talked about earlier was waiting for the conditions, so for example, unitasking. Okay, I guarantee you, if you spend an hour in the day focusing on one thing at a time, you'll do it better. But people will say, but that's really hard because I've got, I'm a solopreneur and I've got to be on all the time, or and so what we're doing is we're waiting for the conditions to be perfect, and they never will be for unitasking. That's not the trajectory that we're going in here. Tech is only going to make us be in more places at once. But that's exactly why the juice is worth the squeeze, because if we persist, even though it's hard, where other people don't, then we've got an edge. We're 40% more effective than our competitors. Let's be honest. So I think, if we can reframe it and go, yes, that's a barrier, but that's not actually a reason to give up. That's a reason to push, because no one else will, and we've got a kind of competitive edge here.
Yeah, amazing. And there's that, interestingly, 90% of businesses don't make it beyond 2 years, and it's super interesting. I'm just the other side of the 2 years now, and suddenly it's just started to, it's a bit weird. I imagine that there's like, so, and it's been hard. It's been really hard, to stay, like, to keep pushing and to keep trying to like get things to work. But slowly things have slotted into place. And there's also an element of maybe the ones that started out 2 years ago, 90% of them have just decided not to bother. So there's only 10% of us left in this. I don't know, but it's super interesting. Like, I always relate like business is about surviving today to take advantage of tomorrow type thing. It's a bit like you just need to, like, keep in there, keep pushing, and you'll start to get your like breakthroughs. So we're running out of time. There's like one last piece on, I suppose, practical steps, and I love Eisenhower matrix. So just use it as, whenever I get stuck, pull out the Eisenhower matrix. Like, just talk us through that. That would be great.
Yes. So the Eisenhower matrix is where you've got a kind of 2 axes, and you've got urgent and important. That's what you're talking about, yeah? Yeah. So if something is urgent and important, so you put it in that box, which for me is top right, then obviously that's something that you're going to do. You need to do it, and that would be a brilliant thing to unitask on as well. But then you've got something which is urgent but not important, and I caveat that with, it's not important that you do it. I'm not talking about fobbing off stuff that you hate, although that is why we have accountants at the end of the day. But, urgent but not important is a prime space for delegating. It needs to be done, but do you need to do it? And is there a system or a person that could do it for you? And also, if you're just thinking slightly bigger picture here, if you've got a team that you're expanding, if you can delegate a task to someone that is just ever so slightly out of their comfort zone, it's just giving them a tiny bit more responsibility, then you're starting to grow your team as well. So you can be quite clever in what you delegate, and it's not just about fobbing stuff off, it's about empowering people and giving them more responsibility than they might have chosen for themselves. So that's the delegate. And then you've got important, not urgent. That's right, yeah. And that's the stuff you plan. You put it in diary and you plan it out. And that could also be when people come to you and go, I need your help with this. And you're like, okay, I definitely want to help you, and I can help you this afternoon. And what's brilliant is when we do that, a lot of the time people work their stuff out. And so they've learned something and they've gained in confidence, and you've been able to get on with your urgent, important. And then there's the not urgent, not important, which is what we get rid of. And I'm going to steal a comment from Deborah Joseph, who I met the other day. She's is the editor-in-chief of Glamour, an amazing woman, and she talked about 70%, choosing the 70%, i.e. she started consciously dropping the bottom 30%. She was dropping balls. And I think that's a lot of things that we don't do. We don't give ourselves permission to go, don't need to do that. Just get rid of it. And we write this to-do list out, and then we get to the bottom of it, or get to the end of the day and go, haven't finished it, I'm going to put that onto the next day. Maybe it wasn't important enough. Give it a good hard Paddington stare and decide if it still needs to be on your list. So be prepared to discard. So I think do it, delegate, plan, and discard. That's your Eisenhower matrix, and I use that, and I found that to be very helpful.
Awesome. Again, that was one of those, the day I found it was the day I got understood that urgent isn't the thing that we should be looking at. It's like, how important is this to do? And we in the sort of cohorts that we run, we talk about, you don't want a to-do list, you want a to-be list. So when you wake up, who do you need to be today to, like, I think
I know we're short on time, but I want to say one more thing on this. When we're under stress, we prioritize everything as urgent, important. So if you write your list out when you're stressed, it will be too long. So if you do, go back to it when you feel calm, and then recategorize. It's not your fault. It's what the brain does to try and keep everything front of mind. So it's just something to be aware. We're not very good at prioritizing under stress. It's worth
interesting. Yeah. Okay. Right. I might need to do mine again like later in the week then. It's been a really busy week. So look, final couple of bits. So book recommendations other than Flying Higher, obviously, anything else that you'd recommend to people to read?
Yeah, I love Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Work Week. I talk about him all the time. What else? What have I got in my bookshelf? I've got loads. Tim Ferriss would be my starting point in terms of kind of, the mind map stuff, or understanding the mind. It all started for me with the chimp paradox. You will get it from my book, obviously, but chimp paradox changed my life. So, from kind of personal development point of view, is that enough to get going?
Yeah, that's brilliant. In the book, you talk about why we sleep, which is on my to listen list, because I'm pretty sure I'm like undiagnosed ADHD, so I can listen. I find it really hard to sit and read a book, but I did sit and read yours. So there you go.
Amazing.
Another breakthrough. So in less than so that's Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, I think.
That's right.
Let people go and search that out. So finally, in less than 20 words, what would you say to people to try and like get the most out of 2023?
My personal mantra is go first. Just be brave, say the thing that you think is stupid, or do the thing that you think is daft but you sort of weirdly believe in, and just go first, because not only does that give you a competitive edge, but in my experience most people are really grateful to you for showing the way, and you're actually not just doing yourself a favor in terms of business, you're doing other people around you a kind of kindness. So just go first. That's what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So there you have it. How we think and feel is a choice. Sitting with difficulty is a skill. We're only born with, I don't know if we mentioned this, but it's definitely in the book. We're only born with 2 fears. So falling and loud noises, all the others are learnt, so it can be unlearned. So hopefully you feel like you can go out and push and move bigger mountains in 2023. Next Wiser Wednesday will be on Web3 and understanding how to navigate that as as startups and entrepreneurs. I'm sure Sarah won't mind you reaching out to her via LinkedIn or her website. Finally, thank you so much, Sarah. I've absolutely loved it today. It's been amazing chatting to you. Could have gone on for another hour. And thank you. So thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you to the audience for listening, and hope everyone feels a little wiser this Wednesday as a result of joining us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. See you all soon.